For 5 years now, Republicans across the country have felt the need to kiss the ring of Donald Trump, sometimes even taking positions that they may not believe in just to stay in the former president's good graces. They've done this out of fear that Trump would try to oust them from office by endorsing a primary opponent. Donald Trump Jr. has even admitted as much, saying that he and his family are, quote, coming for office holders they see as disloyal. But what if Republicans could say things like, I wasn't happy about it, but Joe Biden won the 2020 election, or Vladimir Putin is not savvy, without facing electoral repercussions? A new series of polls in major statewide races suggest that Trump's control over the GOP may be waning. In recent days and weeks, numerous candidates who've been targeted by former President Trump have shown surprising strength in their primary battles with Trump-endorsed challengers. In North Carolina, Congressman Ted Budd, Trump's preferred choice in the Republican primary for Senate, is down big to former Governor Pat McCrory, a far more moderate candidate. A new survey published by Politico shows Budd trailing McCrory by a 35-24 margin, with another candidate, former Congressman Mark Walker, pulling down 17% of the vote. In South Carolina, Congresswoman Nancy Mace is more than holding her own against a more extreme opponent handpicked by Trump. Mace is dominating Trump-backed challenger Katie Arrington, according to local news outlet The State. Their recently published poll shows Mace with a 46-31 lead over Arrington. But maybe most telling of all is what's going on in Georgia. It's the state upon which Donald Trump has been most fixated for the past 18 months. His unfounded allegations of election fraud have put him squarely at odds with the state's Republican leaders, and he appears hell-bent on taking them out. Near the top of Trump's most wanted list is the governor, Brian Kemp. The Georgia governor has infuriated Trump for recognizing the results of the election to the point where the ex-president recruited former Senator David Perdue to run against him, an extremely high-profile opponent that many thought could mean a sure loss for Kemp. But that has not materialized. A Fox News poll shows Kemp holding a 50-39 lead over the Trump-endorsed Perdue, with the Republican primary just a couple of months away. Now, as these elections draw closer, the former president is likely to hold rallies on behalf of some of his favored candidates, and that could have an impact on these races. But this is a big shift. These candidates are showing that there is a way forward in the Republican Party without being tethered to Donald Trump. Joining us now is Linda Chavez. She's a senior fellow at the Niskanen Center. She served in the White House under 3 different Republican presidents. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, so what do you make of all of this?
Well, I think, we've been waiting for Donald Trump's grip to lose its hold on the Republican Party. Some of us, I wasn't holding my breath. But it does appear that the former president is losing some of his ability to be able to turn on people and get his supporters to do the same. And so I think you're seeing in Georgia and other places, in North Carolina, there's another big race in North Carolina where a former governor, Republican governor, is being challenged for the Senate there by a Trump-endorsed member of Congress. And in that case, the Trump endorsement isn't working either. So I think he's really overplayed his hand.
I'm particularly focused on Georgia because I remember when the announcement was made that Perdue was going to run against him, the sentiment was, oh, boy, all right, well, Perdue's going to win now with Trump's endorsement. Kemp's a goner. And suddenly, the latest poll shows Kemp up by 11 points. I mean, that's the one, I think, which is the most defining because Trump has been so active in that particular campaign.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, he basically tried to interfere with Georgia's vote, basically told the Secretary of State there that he wanted to find 11,748 votes so that he could win the election. And now he's trying to interfere in the governor's race. But, as with all candidates, when you endorse somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that has supported you in the past is going to support someone that you endorse. And in fact, in this case, since Trump himself is not on the ballot, some of those voters that would come out for Trump and who might have gone ahead and pulled the lever for Trump's endorsed candidates won't necessarily even vote in that election. So I think it's a rebuke of the president. I think it does show that he's losing his hold. You know, he doesn't have the same kind of platform. He can't get on television all the time. He's not able to tweet. You know, his new social media platform has not been a very successful launch. And so I think he's basically fading.
Let me ask you, how important do you think his position on Putin will be, and in particular on Ukraine as well?
Well, I think it's been very embarrassing to a lot of people what the former president said about Vladimir Putin, basically calling him a genius, saying that he was savvy, and even worse, talking about how smart it was to basically redraw the map and just assume that the eastern part of Ukraine was now part of Russia. And of course, he did this on the eve of the invasion. Once Americans started seeing these pictures of pregnant women being taken from hospitals that had been bombed by the Russians, children dying, a little boy dying of dehydration because there's no water in the town in which he lives, I think those are having an effect. And I think the way in which Trump tied himself to Putin, he basically was one of Putin's biggest supporters, basically was willing to take the word of Putin over his own intelligence officers when it came to whether or not Russia interfered in the 2016 election. All of that, I think, is coming back to haunt Trump. And I think there are a lot of people who are basically being peeled away because of it.
And to be clear, this actually may help Republicans in the general election. I mean, if these more radical candidates who Trump is supporting don't win, that actually may be a good thing for Republicans in the general.
That's exactly right. I mean, the Democrats don't necessarily want to cheer this on. They would much rather run against the Trump-endorsed wackos than against people who have real records and who may actually be able to either be reelected or be elected.
Linda Chavez, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.